Okay. So I am here with Dr. Yolanda Bisbee. Thank you so much for taking time with me to answer some of my questions. If I could just have you state your title and tell me how long you've been in your position.
So I'm the Executive Director of Tribal Relations and the Chief Diversity Officer for the university. I have been in the dual role for about a year and a half, maybe. Before the dual role, I was just the Tribal Relations Officer and Interim Chief Diversity Officer. So for both roles, about 3 years.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're just going to dive into some questions that are based on a book called Leadership BS by Jeffrey Pfeffer. So my first question is, in our reading material, Jeffrey Pfeffer suggests that the interests of a leader's career goals, the needs of their employees, and the needs of their organization are almost always at odds. As a leader, in your experience, do you feel like these interests and needs can be aligned to complement each other? And has that been able to happen in your professional experience?
I think for me, as somebody who comes from a underrepresented population, and what I've observed in other organizations where the leadership is from underrepresented populations, to me it is always about the work and the staff, the key players who are part of that organization. And I think where it comes at odds is in the work-life balance, because it does become a priority about trying to create change, and it becomes every aspect of your life is, well, at least for me, it's always been about every aspect of my life, always trying to figure out ways to create that change, to create more space for Native students, for Latino students, for African American students. So I think, and I don't want to generalize, but I think for our organizations of color, it is more about the whole as opposed to how I achieve individually. I've never set out to say I was going to be the Chief Diversity Officer. It was never an aspiration. It was always just trying to be a voice at the table to create that change for me.
So in your experience, it sounds like it's been much more about serving your constituents, serving those students.
Yes, for me it has been.
Thank you. So my second question is, Jeffrey Pfeffer also believes that leaders should not truly be authentic because they need to put the needs of others before their own. So his idea of realistic authenticity is that if you are truly being authentic, you're being authentic to your own needs and feelings. So kind of a different way to think about it than how I have thought about it. What do you think about that belief, and how do you utilize authenticity in your style of leadership?
So I'm going to be very candid.
Please.
Is the author a white male?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think white male, of course, I think have that perspective. Now, I'm not generalizing, but I think the majority of white males have that perspective about looking out for number one and not being authentic, being very guarded. For women and for people of color, I feel like you have to be authentic. We're trying to impact an organization or a company. You mentioned that this was more on a company model that is probably predominantly white and predominantly male. And in order for us to gain momentum and to build capacity, community, we have to be authentic about how we're going about doing that. And so I would have to say that I've done that, and it also, a good example of that is in our recruitment initiatives here at UI. They say, don't get too close, don't share your personal stories, just give the information about the University of Idaho. And for us, it's about, no, I'm going to share my story. Everybody knows my failures as a student. Everybody knows the road that I had to take to get here, because it's being genuine and letting them know that there is a human side and you can do this, So I think that's very important, that you have to be authentic. with women and with underrepresented populations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you shared that. In his book, there is a small section where he talks about minority populations and women, and it's a very small. It's not even a chapter. It's a small. My third question. Although leaders need to put the needs of others before their own on a daily basis, Pfeffer believes, he also states that they need to look out for their own interests rather than expecting the organization to look out for their interests. Do you feel that you've had to advocate for your own needs to get where you are, or do you feel that the organization has supported career advancement for you?
Sometimes I think I'm gullible or naive, because I haven't been trained in that worldview that you go after what you want to get it. I haven't. I always tell everybody my career path has always been very organic. I work hard. I try to do good things in a good way, and hope that people will recognize that to help me move whatever it is that I'm trying to move forward. If we're looking at inclusivity, trying to do everything I can in that people want to be on board with it. So I haven't ever said, like I said in the first question, I'm going to be Chief Diversity Officer. It wasn't my intent. It wasn't my move. But I did realize that in order for me to create greater change, I needed to be at a higher level. I didn't know what that would look like, other than I needed to have that degree in order to be at the table, say, at an institution. So that did play a role, but I did it in a very non-traditional way, working my butt off full-time and then going to school part-time to achieve that, without a goal to say how I was going to be at the table and do that, just working hard. So I didn't, to some extent, you do put your own interest at first to say I need to get the degree. Because looking at the game, that's what I got to do. But it was never, I got to get the job so I can get higher pay. That's not always been my payoff. That's not been my goal. It's been about for the greater good. Now, not all people are like that, but for me, that's how it's been. And I think that that was important. It had to go that way in order for it to happen. Now, am I being great at it? Maybe not, but I'm trying. And so, always, I agree that you always have to put everybody else first. But it also takes a person to be able to, in this position that I'm in, to realize that is the job. You put everybody else first. In all of the positions I've been, it's always putting everybody else first because that's the job. Now, in a different role, it may not be that way. But in student service, it is about putting others first.
Thank you. Thank you. My fourth question is, Pfeffer believes that people express leadership styles and their own priorities similarly throughout their careers, regardless of if they're just starting out or if they're more advanced in their career. Has this been the case for you? And now that you're in a senior leadership position, has your style evolved, or has it remained mostly the same?
No, it's evolved. It truly has evolved. I had in my younger years, I had a mentor or supervisor who was a very strong woman, very aggressive, very assertive, demanding in your face, saying, we need to do this now. And I saw when I was younger, that's how my style was. And I think, and I look at the times, I had to be that way, I think. The numbers were lower here for our underrepresented populations. We were trying to create a voice. And so I was at the table saying, that's not right, why aren't we doing this, charging, the institution. Then as it became a director and trying to create community, I started out that way, but then I realized that wasn't getting me that way because I had other people with the same vision and same goals towards creating that change, that I had to be more of a team player as opposed to now I've got people around me who I don't have to charge at all the time because we need to charge together.
Mm-hmm.
So the leadership style became very team-oriented. I love community synergy. I love being able to sit down and have everybody come up with their ideas and concept to come to the solution. I'm not one to say I've got all the answers. There's a time where I have to step up and say, I went this way because of this, but I'm always trying to seek others' input into how we do that. I think it creates better collaborations. I think it creates more ideas to be able to approach it that way. I become more patient, but I don't know if that's so much because of my leadership style changing as opposed to age, but it has changed. It's changed a lot from if you saw me at a younger age, I created more enemies than I did creating, bridges and collaborations. So it's changed a lot.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And my last question is that Pfeffer states that as a profession, in the leadership profession or the leadership field, we don't have a lot of scientific evidence of what works really in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you learned to become a leader? Did this occur through schooling, mentorship, just on-the-job experience?
Mm-hmm. I think it's all of the things. I did take AOL courses in my master's degree, and they resonated because it was different theories about what, and I tried to figure out where am I at and how do I fit into some of these styles. Of course, some of them were very Western worldview, so I would look to things that out there that were unique. One of the things that I saw was this theory Z, and I don't know if it even implemented, but it was a concept I think it was out of Alaska, and it was about community engagement and teamwork and involvement in leadership. I think that's what it was. And so these types of courses helped me. Seeing how my former mentors their styles and how they would cut off people as opposed to try to build collaborations and building, that kind of helped me figure out, how I need to change my style a little bit. Being shut down all the time, the experience that you get, being shut down all the time and figuring out what did I just do there, what could I change to make that better, knowing that I need to create more collaborations and I needed to be able to people to shut the door. I had to have a different approach than what others are approaching at. I couldn't be in your face, that's wrong. It's about, let's talk about that. Why does that not sit well? So it was all of those, the experience, good and bad, looking at what other leaders do, and then the coursework and being able to research a little bit about what is out there and how do I fit in that.
If I could just ask one more question, well, another question. As a woman and a woman of color, were there specific sources you felt were helpful in learning about leadership? I mean, as you mentioned, the text I've been reading is written by a white man, and that's obviously you could tell that. So were there sources that you felt were helpful?
I am really bad about remembering authors, and I just remember concepts. And I'm a storyteller, so I remember going to a Woman of Color Alliance, and we were talking about strategic development and capacity building, and I had this author that was a white male who I liked the idea, and I went to the concept, and they asked me to present that. So I presented, and I remember a black woman standing up and saying, "We need to talk," because I had never been out of Idaho. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, okay, what did I do? What did I say? And she says, you need to look at other authors because you're citing a white male, and you need to be looking at what else is out there. And I remember her sitting me down and giving me some other authors, and I wish I would have kept that, because there was one that I did read out of that, because I was like, she's right. I haven't been out of Idaho. I hadn't looked at what other research was, and this was after my bachelor's. So I hadn't even been thinking about my master's, and I think that's kind of also what enticed me to do that. So, and then after that, I became more engaged about going to more conferences that were for women and women of color, just going out and seeking out those types of resources, you know, to get that other perspective that I wasn't getting here. I can't think of.
I know that INCOR is one of those conferences.
Oh yeah, that's a very good conference.
Okay.
It's very good, but it's very big, but it has a lot of variety on there. And then others were around Native issues that I would go seek out for Native women. And then I'm trying to think of where else I would have some other things. I know if I could have thought about that, I probably could have pulled some from you. But there was some really good ones that I went and looked at.
Maybe I can follow up with you on that.
Yeah, I'll try to think of what they are. So, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering my questions. And then just for the information of the video is the Executive Director of Tribal Relations and our Chief Diversity Officer here at U of I. Can you tell me all of the offices and units that you supervise?
Yes, I have the two offices. They're really supposed to be two offices, Tribal Relations and Office of Equity and Diversity. And then the units that follow under Equity and Diversity, which is the Women's Center, LGBTQA Office, Office of Multicultural Affairs, Camp, and the Native American Student Center.
Okay. Yep. Thank you so much, and thank you for the time, taking the time to let me interview you.
All right,
really
thank you.
appreciate it.